All right. And yeah, so we're rolling. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leo Sukiyo. I'm doing Leo's Lounge. This panel is going to be discussing coaching in relation to the amateur League of Legends scene. How's that English for you right there? All right, today I have with me Zadro and Salvatore. We're going to go around. We're going to have them introduce themselves. So, Zadro, we're going to start off with you. You can state your name, IGN, titles, experience, whatever you'd like.
Hi, I'm Zadro. My IGN is Zadro, and I am a head coach, not currently for any team, but I have been for Exile Ember, Surge, and then Midnight Gaming Red and Obsession before. And
all right.
That's me.
Yeah. All right. Salvatore, you're up next.
Hey. All right, Solomon, I go by Salvatore. My IGN is the same thing with a weird A, so you can't actually add me just like that. I'm currently a head coach for a team that I can't say right now.
That's fair.
But I've worked with a lot of popular orgs: Flashpoint, Underdog, Supernova, Rewind. So yeah.
All right, sounds pretty good. All right, so now that we have a little bit of context, a little bit of history, general knowledge, I do want to get into something a little more philosophical first before we get into the depths of the coaching in relation to the amateur scene. So, like we've seen in recent history, like conflicts in terms of game perception, and then also the coaches tournament, which was formed by Ellis and Weldon in conjunction. So, considering these varying styles of coaching philosophies, I wanted to ask you both respectively. What does the role and title of coach mean to you personally, and what type of responsibilities must a coach attend to? So we'll start off with you, Salvatore.
A role and title of coach, like, it essentially means that you're the main figure that this group of 5 or 6 players, depending on if you're bringing in subs or whatever, like, your job is to make sure that these 5 or 6 or 7 players or whatever it is understand not only the concept of the game, but how to communicate with one another. And that's something that a lot of coaches don't do, is they don't put focus on, can you communicate properly? How do your post-game discussions go? And they only look at in-game, or they don't look at in-game and they only look at how they communicate. But a coach's role is like, you're going to be their guardian, essentially. You're going to be like the person that they go to for advice, on top of being someone who guides them in the right direction for everything.
Okay.
And like responsibilities, like it's the same kind of thing. Like, it's just when you're the head coach, especially in the amateur scene, where you're not in these big orgs that have, 3 analysts, a life coach, a cook in the house. Like, your responsibilities as a head coach in the amateur scene especially is just, you are responsible for everything for the team. Like, you make the schedule, you do pick bands, you have to be well prepared. And a lot of people don't realize it, but more often than not, coaches put in more time into the team than the actual players do.
I see what you're saying. Because the vast amount of preparation before a game, and then having to look at VODs and such duties like that obviously takes up an enormous amount of time.
Yeah, like, I could give like an example, like leading up to OQs, my team at the time we played under Polar Ace we were probably scrimming for about 4 to 6 hours a night. And then I was watching VODs after we do scrims for 3 hours. And then I was doing pick bands for like half an hour every night. And that was like for the 3 weeks before OQs. And like, it's a lot of time where the players are, they're playing solo queue, they're playing the game, they're working on mechanics and stuff, but you're like really putting in the grueling hours that no one else wants to do.
I see. All right. Zadro, what do you think? Role and title of coach to you, and the types of responsibilities that a coach has to attend to.
I would agree heavily with what Salvatore had said.
Okay.
And I also would like to add that you're also coaching a lot of these new players who haven't been on teams before, haven't been in a professional environment. And it's your job to kind of like bring them into that world, like show them that this is a professional arena, and it's your job to do that. So like, I'm always being there early, I'm being there later, I'm doing like the extra hours and stuff like that, putting in the extra mile, and like these people see that. So you're kind of introducing like an entire group of people to this professionalism that you can, even though the amateur scene might not have that.
Okay. No, I definitely like these answers. I was also going to just generally add, because I did spend a small amount of time as a head coach and analyst, so I do agree with everything that the both of you have said. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that coaches have to do, especially in what I'll call it the after hours, which is like after the match set is already done in either scrims or a league or a tournament, where it's like you're reviewing the post game. You're looking at what might have happened in that particular game. You might just be thinking about how the team communicated. You might have to actually focus on lane assignments. There are many, many things in hindsight that have to actually be analyzed, and the time it takes is absolutely enormous. So I just wanted to kind of second, or third in this case, that opinion there. But since we've established the duties and like the role of a coach, or what it means to us, then what is it like to coach in the amateur scene specifically? And what I mean by this, just to kind of elaborate a little bit, is we know it's not obviously economically flourishing, so the resources available are a lot less. A lot of the organizations, like Salvatore did say, they don't have the cook, they don't have the 3 analysts. Alternatively, you have a lot of players who are looking for the team experience and kind of off of the solo queue grind. So we have the same thing that Zadro pointed out, like that transition into the professional environment and the type of regiment that you would need to follow to actually become part of a team and better yourself as a player. So in the amateur scene, knowing that all of these things are in front of you is kind of like obstacles. What is it like to coach, and what opportunities are available for someone looking to coach? Zadro, we'll start with you.
Okay. What's it like to coach in the amateur scene? I feel like you're going to be you're dealing with a lot of new people, like I had stated, and often players in this elo, they like haven't, they're like not open to fully be criticized, because they don't like when they're new and they're coming in, they don't they're not looking at pure self-improvement. But otherwise, there's a lot of opportunity to be coaching within the amateur scene, because there's a lot of new orgs coming up and a lot of teams looking to try to prove themselves, and there is a shortage of coaches comparatively to players.
Okay.
So you do have a lot of opportunities, and whether they're trustable opportunities, that's a different topic. But there are definitely a lot of opportunities. But that's that with the opportunities. Coaching, you need to be like a role model, because a lot of these, it's just most of players who are in the amateur scene who are trying to get into the semi-professional scene are like here and there. People will come in, try, and then they'll like lose heart, and then they'll get out. You have to put in a lot of dedication as a coach, because you're like their role model. You're the person who is working really hard, and they're coming in and they're looking at you. So you have to be a role model to these players, because often they're like 15, 16, 17 years old, and they haven't, sometimes some of them haven't even worked before, like as a job. So they haven't really taken something very seriously, and we're trying to get it to that point to where all of this is very serious. And if we can make the amateur scene and coaching it very serious, then we can make the players feel like that.
So in a sense, kind of emulating essentially what we get to see every day when we look on the likes of Reddit, like in the professional scene, where you do have this coach that is on stage and guiding players through pick ban, emulating that experience so that they can see something more tangible if that is their end goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Salvatore, anything to add? What's it like coaching in the amateur scene, and what type of opportunities might be available?
Yeah, I'm actually going to answer the second question first.
Okay.
I think there are a very, very large number of opportunities, and because it's the amateur scene, if you're already an established coach, you're not looking for opportunities. People are coming to you with opportunities. So if you're looking for opportunities, then smaller orgs or orgs that are starting like a B team, they're going to give you that shot. Like just 100%, they'll say, yeah, man, sure. Like you could be a great coach, and we'll never know unless we give you a shot. So like, I actually think if you're like wanting to get into coaching, I 100% like fully believe that you would be able to find an opportunity somewhere.
Okay, so there should always be something available to someone, as long as they're looking at these organizations.
Yeah, like there always will be a team that is willing to bring you on.
Okay.
As far as what's it like to coach in the amateur scene, I've recently gotten a chance to work outside of the amateur scene and kind of like work and see these players and teams of a challenger series level and higher. And the difference between the two, I didn't think it was going to be like that drastic, but it is. Like working in the amateur scene, you're dealing with a lot of ego, a lot of players who don't know very basic communication. So you have to kind of like teach them how to be communicating with their teammates. You're obviously dealing like with what Zadro said, very young players. So a lot of them don't even know how to be talking to teammates, and like they don't feel comfortable bringing up certain things about bad gameplay or like mistakes that they want to talk about. But like overall coaching, it's a good experience as long as you've gotten yourself and your players as comfortable as possible with one another, because if they're not comfortable, then it's going to cause a lot of tension in between the team, and that's going to be a really bad environment for everyone. So as long as you can get a good environment early on, then even if you lose every single game, it's going to be a learning process for everyone, and it'll be an enjoyable time. But coaching in the amateur scene is definitely one of the most like hard things that you'll have to do if you want to take coaching to the next level, because you're starting out with so many players who don't know the basics when you're expecting them to know them.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It becomes a lot more rigorous and meticulous because it's basically starting from scratch, whereas opposed to if you come into a professional team or an organization, the difference would be these players have probably played on a team like this before, or at least they play at a high enough level where you don't have to actually even consider things necessarily like mechanics as heavily as just integrating into a team environment, is basically what I'm deriving from all this.
Yeah, just like when you're first starting out, it's really rough because you're going to be almost guaranteed put on a team that is just not going to be the best, and you have to work your way up from there. Like, I think the first team I coached was a Platinum 3 local team. Like, they were like Plat 3 to D5 kind of thing. Okay. And like it's hard to coach because there's egos on the team, because the players who are, the highest rank are going to be, okay, well, I'm obviously better than you because I'm Diamond and you're not. So there's a lot of egos to deal with. There's a lot of basic mechanics that some players know and other players don't know. And like it's a lot of stuff that clashes all at once.
All right, I think that's a fair sentiment. I've definitely seen, well, none of us are a stranger to it, having involvements in the amateur scene, seeing a player ego directly, and how it can adversely affect what could otherwise be actually a very promising unit of players. So I definitely have to second, or I guess I should say third, that one. I have to get into the habit of saying that here. There's three of us here. Hello. All right. With that out of the way, to my personal experience, I know that most of the benefits of working in the amateur scene as a coach, typically it's like volunteer work. So it kind of pays in having something to throw onto your resume. Obviously, there is an element of social networking involved, but what, in your words, would you say is some of the greatest benefits, or drawbacks of working within the amateur scene? Salvatore, we'll start with you.
The greatest benefits that I found is not necessarily even the network of like org owners that you meet or other coaches or assistant coaches, but it's actually the players. So like I was saying earlier, when you have like that good environment, right, then players are going to like you. And if you set yourself up and your team for success and it doesn't work out, people go their own ways, then you get players who, they're going to move on. They're going to go to bigger and better teams. And when that happens, if they have a good impression of you and they think that you're, fairly decent, then you get that like bit of an upgrade when they mention you to the new org they're at, right?
I see what you're saying.
Like that's happened to me for a few times. So that's how I kind of started out my career, is just having players that would, they started in like Diamond 5 and then they hit D3. So they joined a D3 team and then they were like, hey, we should bring on Salvatore. I've worked with him in the past. He's pretty good. And it kind of goes from there. But like that would be probably one of the greatest things, is just being able to meet all of the different players and you also you get, because it's the amateur scene, you get to make friends with them. Like, you're not just coworkers, but you're friends in the end. And that's like it's a very good feeling to have when you come across, the few players where you just get along really well with, and you keep talking to them after, the team is disbanded and you're all on to new things.
Okay.
As far as drawbacks, like, it's the time you put in. And even though it's something that, like, we're all in esports because we love it, I'm sure that Zadro, you can agree with that. Same with you, Leo. But
Definitely.
like, when you're coaching an amateur team, especially, you're putting in hours out of every single day, and then those hours, more often than not, are not being paid for. You're taking time off of a sleep schedule before work tomorrow, or you're not doing homework for school because you're coaching instead. And in the end, like, you're doing all of it to just put it on your resume that you were on the team and you succeeded in a tournament somewhere. And like, it's one of the things where I say it's a drawback, but it's more just like you have to work for it. But the reason why I would consider it a drawback is because you are doing it for free, and you have to give up a lot of your own time, and you have to be willing to make that extra little sacrifice to go as far as you can.
I think that's very reasonable. Zadro?
Yeah, I would agree with him on the time. That is a major drawback. One of the benefits, well, I have several benefits in my mind. I think networking with getting to know plenty of coaches is great, because if you're able to be talking to a lot of coaches, and even with what Salvatore was talking about with the players, if you start seeing all these different organizations being introduced from different players, you start talking to all these coaches, you get to see a lot of different perspectives of the game. So you have a lot of people to bounce your ideas off to increase your knowledge of the game and to look at it from several different perspectives. Then also one benefit that I think is when you get to deal with a lot of players with different personalities and different sized egos. And if you're working with them over and over again, eventually you're going to understand how to correctly talk to and work with all types of players because of the exposure you get to all of these different personalities.
I see.
And I think that's important. And with the drawbacks, I would say the time, because like Salvatore said, you're not getting paid. You are putting in a extraneous amount of time into coaching. So I'd say that is like one of the biggest drawbacks. But if you have the time in the amateur scene, there's not much drawbacks at all, except for the time that you're putting in without getting paid.
I think that's reasonable. Coming from personal experience myself, I know that lack of compensation is a little trying, considering all of the work that does go into it. And we touched upon various facets of coaching before, such as things like pick ban, scouting out opposition when you have to go up against them in a match, whether it be in a league or in a tournament. Similarly, reviewing VODs for a host of different things, with or without comms, changes the dynamic of what you're doing entirely, whether or not you're focusing on communication or just team interaction, resource allocation. It's endless. It's absolutely endless. So I definitely understand why you both list it as like a drawback, in the sense of how much time it does take for little to no compensation. Compensation is pretty rare, I think we could all agree. Yeah, that is kind of I think that the benefits outweigh. Would you say the benefits outweigh the drawbacks? I would say that they do.
Yeah, I would say they heavily do.
I think if the benefits outweigh the drawbacks, if you're looking to be a long-time coach. If you're looking for a short-time thing, then the drawbacks seem very heavy on you. But if you're looking to be coaching for, even just 6 months or a year and a half, 2 years or longer, then the benefits, because of the drawback of putting in so much time, during that time, you're making all of these connections and all of these different, people that you're meeting. You're learning different styles of the game. You start branching out into looking through other regions, and it's slowly the longer you put in, which makes your drawback bigger, the larger your benefits get.
I see what you're saying. It's like, what's the term? Exponential growth, in a sense. If you're staying for the long term, then the benefits become increasingly more. They outweigh the drawbacks in that sense.
Yeah.
All right. So recently, I've been attempting to kind of explore and flesh out the amateur scene, and with respect to that quest, I just wanted to ask, since we've already established all of this prior information, what is it like to work with these different organizations within the amateur League of Legends scene? Since both of you have worked on a number of different organizations, and also, how would the infrastructure differ from org to org? Like, what's the best you've seen, the kind of minimal that you've seen as well? We'll start with you, Salvatore.
This is a really interesting one for me because I've had a lot of really good experiences and then a lot of really bad experiences in orgs. Infrastructure in the amateur scene, like the infrastructure doesn't matter that much. Like on almost every team that you're playing on in any org, it's going to be you and 5 players, and that's it. It's going to be very rarely that they bring someone in until it, comes to a big tournament like OQs, or unless you request to have someone extra there. Like the infrastructure is going to be just you and 5 players and an org owner that you talk to occasionally. Like for the most part, that's how it's going to be. But then when it comes to things like open qualifiers, then, a month beforehand, an org owner will be like, oh man, we should bring on an analyst. Like, I don't know why we didn't have one before. And it's just because, they care so much more about, that tournament, which is understandable. But like I said, like the infrastructure is going to be very similar unless you as a coach request it to be different, which is something that I've been doing. Like a lot of people know that on almost every team that I've coached in the last year, I've had Dante, who has gone by Zadro Dante, Ashen Lord Dante, now Yowie Dante.
Yes.
He's been my assistant coach for a very, very long time. And it's because I've been working with him for so long that every time I join a team, I tell them, listen, I got to bring this guy with me. He's gonna help. He'll be a sub because he always ends up playing at some point. Like, I just need it. And it's something that I, as a coach, take the initiative to do. Where it's like, listen, I want Dante with me because we work so well together, and he like boosts my confidence as a coach, and confidence isn't only important for players but coaches as well.
I think that's definitely important, and usually understated, because a lot of people see coaches at the helm quite often, and often forget that just as players are people, so are coaches, and everybody at a basic human level, thrives off of being sure that they're confident in what they're doing, and to be confident in what you're doing, you have to have either success or even just backup from your players or the people around you to tell you, hey, you had the great idea, you made the great plan, and we executed it the best that we could. Some sort of support is the point, just to kind of
and like to kind of like segue into that a little bit. Like something that people really underestimate is, and I'm sure that both of you can agree with this, when a player does a really good, has like an amazing game, a really important game, like a finals or something, and everyone congratulates them. They're like, wow, like you played amazing today. Like, like that was awesome. You did really, really good. You did everything you needed to. You made the right calls. You got, you landed your smites. I think people really underrate how much it means for coaches if, like, after a scrim or after a tournament game, someone goes up to the coach and just says, your draft today was amazing. Like that, you did that perfectly. Like they messed up, but you took advantage of everything that they did. Or, like when you do a VOD review, someone says like, man, like that VOD review actually felt like it helped a lot. Like, I feel like people underestimate how much the little compliments to a coach can just make that coach just want to do more and want to do a better job next time, because they feel like, they're accomplishing something. And I think that, I don't know if you guys can agree with that, but that's like something that I've personally had a lot of issues with, is that I just sometimes you're doing a lot and then you don't feel rewarded sometimes from it. But like a compensation kind of thing that can happen is when people just tell you that you're doing a good job. And it's sometimes just all that you want to hear.
To be honest, and just piggyback off of that just briefly, is I think that's just a common human experience too, right? It's not even something that's exclusive to coaching in the amateur scene. It's just generally, is no matter where you work, no matter what you do, to do your job well and hear nothing about it versus to do your job well and to hear that you are doing it well means kind of the world of difference in terms of just motivation and understanding that someone's acknowledging the work that you're putting forward. Not that someone should do less if they don't get acknowledgement, but it always just feels extra amazing to know that somebody is spotting the work that you're doing, commending you for it, and it just makes you know that, first of all, you're on the right path, because obviously what you're doing is good enough to be commended for, and then secondly, try to anticipate how you take it a step further, or at least that's how I feel.
Yeah, and like I mention it because it is like, a common human thing that people should be doing, but I feel like it's definitely one of the things that is lacking the most in the amateur scene for coaches, is that recognition is never given. It's a very rare thing. As far as working with different orgs, that's a really hit or miss thing. Like, you can have orgs that will do everything for you, and they'll be the best people in your life right now. But then you'll also have orgs who will, say, hey, if you guys win this tournament, we want 10% of it because you're playing under our name. Or there'll be orgs that will, like, force you to do a roster change, but you don't think that's necessary. You just think it was one bad series. And I'm pretty sure that I've gone through almost every different kind of org that there is, where just like the way that they handle things. But I think for the most part, the community is very outspoken about what orgs are good and what orgs are not. So when you're looking, like, it's very easy to get an offer from someone and be like, hey, like, we'd love for you to join, and then you to message one or two people, and you'll get honest opinions for the most part.
All right, that's, first of all, it's good that there's that level of transparency, because the community is vocal, and I think that's just a common theme in esports generally as well, where, since obviously it's esports, it's on the internet, so everyone is coming to view, coming to watch, and they're going to talk about it. Even if they go see it live, they're going to be talking about it on the internet, so you're going to always hear something about any event, any organization. Just as a quick example, there was the Reddit post like a few weeks back of the gentleman who emailed all 10 LCS teams in North America, and like only 2 replied. I think it was like Echo Fox and somebody else, but it's an interesting concept to think about.
Yeah, and like there's always going to be, orgs that, don't offer you much other than a brand name, and then, like would try and like bring down your team or your players if you got an offer that, gave you some merchandise or some money or something like that, right? Like there's always going to be people who run those kinds of orgs. But like I said, when you have these networks that you're building, you're able to start talking to people and ask them like, hey, like, what do you think of, like Polar Ace? And then, they ask me that. I say, well, actually, Polar Ace was a very good org to work for. They, their owner had done everything that we requested of him. He was very honest with everyone and thoughtful. And like, that's an example because it was the most recent org that I worked with. But there's a lot of different orgs and situations that everyone is going to be put in. And when you're a coach of a team and you're not a coach of the org, you're moving with the team. So when like you have to think about what's best for the players and not just yourself, right? Because the players are the careers that you're building for the future, right? They're going to be, potentially the next LCS superstars. And that's a realistic scenario with some teams. But if you're a coach for that team, like that's how I was for a very long time, is I coached the team. I didn't coach for the org. And a lot of orgs got very mad at me for that. But from my view, like my focus was on the players, not on making the org look good. Like if the players looked good, then sure, the org would look good. But that was my focus first. And like that's another different kind of org that's going to happen in the amateur scene, is where people want you to coach for their org and not for their team. But like I feel like you really just have to put everything into the team and not the org.
All right, I think that's reasonable, especially if you're working with specific players for a long period of time. It makes the most sense. And I want to say we could actually even link that back to the first question, where that's a part of the coaching philosophy that you also have specifically. Although I definitely believe that is a very, very valuable philosophy to have.
Yeah, like I've been with, I don't know how many people know of Fost, but Fost the Magi, or used to be known as Fost Scripter, I've been with him since Flashpoint Esports about 8 months ago. Like, we've been on the same team for a very, very long time. And it's just one of those things where, like, through any roster change that we did or any org that we went to, we've always been a part of the team, never a part of the org, because the team always comes first. And that's how you're going to find the most success.
No, I definitely like that. Zadro, how do you feel? What it's like to work with different organizations in the amateur scene, and how infrastructure may vary from org to org?
So, yeah, I agree with Salvatore on like the differentiating organizations. There's definitely really good ones out there, and there's definitely like ones who aren't trustworthy or ones who just like pop up and then are gone. Like there will be like just a couple players and like a team captain who say that they're an organization, and then they're trying to start stuff off, and then like 2 weeks into it, they are like, oh, this is way too much. I wasn't expecting this, and then they pop off the face of the earth. And then there are organizations who are very well established and very trustworthy and work very well with their players and their staff. And that's where I want to get to a point that I have a slight disagreement with Salvatore. He was saying that the infrastructure in amateur doesn't really matter that much, when I think it's slightly on the contrary. When you have a well-established organization who has good infrastructure, who has been around for a long time, it's much easier for players to trust them, so that they know that when their players are going to go play for them, that they're going to be in a good place. Same with coaches. And then also, if I go to coach a good, well-established organization who has good infrastructure, I can trust if I need an analyst or if I need somebody extra on the staff, I can trust that the owner is going to be able to acquire those members. Right. And I can also trust that the organization isn't going to just decide to stop, because I understand that they've been around for a long time and the owner does have money to put into this and they're well established.
I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean,
okay, I actually fully agree with that. I worded it really poorly. When I meant like it doesn't like differ that much, I meant like for the team itself. Like I don't go into an org and I'm not expecting them to have an analyst ready for me. You know what I mean? Like I agree with you 100%. If the org is more established, you know, they have multiple teams, they've been around for a long time. And examples of that, you know, would be like Supernova, Zenith, even Sky, like teams and orgs like that, like Supernova and Zenith, they've been around for so long that if you join them, you know they have the resources to give you more if you want it. And I 100% agree that's better. But I was more so saying, like, when you join an org, like you shouldn't expect them to just be like, yeah, you have an analyst, a player coach. Like, they're not going to be offering you those things unless you ask for it for the most part, because they generally just want you to come on and make their team better, but they don't actually think as far to go and get more staff. And like, you could have had different experiences than I have, of course. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And more on what my experiences with working with teams. I'm going to shed some light on like my best experiences and my worst experiences. My best experiences was with Exile, and their owner was very, very like in the loop. Like, he was very active with our team and with me. He would always come and like check on, and he would provide me with whatever I needed. And we had a long like 6-month run, and he was doing it for the players and the coaching staff. He wasn't doing it to further his organization, although that was happening when he was helping us. But his primary goal was to assist us, his teams, and his coaching staff. And that was very nice. If I needed something, he would be right there. He'd be ready to do it. And it was a very nice experience working with them. My worst experience was me just joining an org, a really small, somewhat new organization, like low Diamond 5 players, and they want to start getting good. And then when I start coaching them, and then they say that I'm a lower rank than them, and I don't know what I'm talking about, and then stop, and then I can't be their coach anymore. And it's like, yeah, that's where, you know, the bigger orgs and the more trustworthy orgs come into place. It's like, you really need to be ready to know what you're doing when you're going in and looking for organizations to coach.
I think that's a fair assessment. I always find it funny. It's interesting when people generally like to use rank. This is the difficulty in this, right? Because generally speaking, people who are of a higher rank technically are better in some aspect of the game. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be of a higher rank. But at the same time, to weigh down somebody's in-game knowledge against their specific performance, it feels a little unfair, because, I mean, you can look at some of the current coaches. I think even Ellis, I'm pretty sure he's not Masters right now, and yet he can still coach, and he coaches individual players all the time. And the point that I'm making here is you don't have to be at the very, very tip top to understand the game and how it works fundamentally. Whether or not you can execute for yourself is a little bit different, but to be able to teach someone else who might have the mechanics or tricks for them to improve their mechanics, and they could just adapt to it better. There are so many gray areas, right? And to immediately rule out somebody's knowledge just based off of their rank alone is a little, I don't really want to say close-minded, but it feels very inefficient. because there are definitely things that people have to offer, and you can learn new information from nearly anyone as long as you open your ears to it and then assess it fairly and determine whether or not it's something you knew, didn't know, if it would be helpful, wouldn't be helpful, and so on and so forth. Just to kind of back that up, because I really do hate when people use the ranked argument. But my little rant is over from that. So anything else about like from working from org to org or different orgs and what it's like?
I think I have said all I have to say on that matter.
Yeah, it's just you got to take your own experiences and either trust or not trust what other people tell you if you ask for help about it. But overall, it's going to be very dependent. And like even with what I was saying, where like when you ask someone like, "Hey, like how is this org?" Like that org could have changed. You know what I mean? Like they could have been bad when you were on it, but when this person joins, it'll be a completely different story.
Oh, definitely.
So it's going to be very like you just have to join and see what it is for yourself. Like you should never just take someone else's opinion for it and just say, okay, that's the truth. You should always look at it yourself.
Oh, definitely. I think that's very fair. To say anything else would mean to presume that nobody could change ever, and it's only fair to understand that everything is ever changing. People might have a bad start, not know exactly how to coordinate perhaps their organization, and then with time, with experience, they realize, hey, you know what, we weren't conducting this so efficiently. Perhaps what we were doing was a little unfair to a coach or a player or a team if we have multiple teams, and now we know better, so now we can improve. So I think that's definitely a fair statement. On the topic of organizations, though, in the amateur scene, the success rate for organizations in the amateur scene, we could say is slim to none. I'm going to put that in the context of like the ambition or the goal of reaching, say, North America Challenger Series. And we can see that because obviously if we look at a tournament structure like the Open Qualifiers, two teams get the opportunity to play for just for the chance to get in. They get the chance to play to get into the NACS, right? So considering the vast amount of organizations, that's a pretty slim margin. How valuable or vital is it, in your opinion, for an organization to have someone on board in the coaching capacity? And what can a coach do within this context that players or owners specifically cannot? And Zadro, will start with you this time.
So I think organizations to have somebody who is a coach like on their staff like consistently is quite important, because first off, especially if they're well known, or at least if you talk to them, you can understand that they have skill on what they're doing. If a player is coming to interview for a spot or he wants to know if he wants to try out for this organization, and they say, oh, and we already have this insert well-known coach on our staff, then that's going to pull better players to wanting to play with this organization, rather than saying, oh, we're still looking for staff here. The players that are trying to join, or a potential analyst that's trying to join, don't know if they're going to get some guy who's only coached like one platinum team before, if they're going to get like a seasoned, like in between semi-pro and amateur scene coach.
Okay.
So I think for organizations wanting to go somewhere, it's quite important for them to have a coach on their like staff, and what can a coach do that players or owners cannot? I think that they just add, like I was saying, they add incentive to join, because every organization is going to have an owner, so players are going to want to join them. What that players can't do, I feel like coaches can better represent teams, like as a team captain. So they can be like a face of a team within like a tournament. Okay. And like you can kind of be the one who's networking for the team and is getting these scrims and talking to all these other teams to get these owners. I would say can do that, but not as well as coaches, because owners can't be there for every game and they can't know everything about their players because they're dealing with so much stuff. They have so many things on their plate. And also, of course, coaches can think of the game in just a higher aspect than either most of the time, and that's obvious.
Would you say that in terms of perspective, because obviously players engage in the game directly, so do you think that for a coach specifically, obviously the mindset is a little bit different. Not only do you engage in the game to understand it, but the perspective a coach offers specifically that owners and players alike can't. Would it be fair to say that it's kind of like the viewing the bigger picture? It's like while the players are looking at the rift, you're looking outside and seeing how everything else is like snapping together to see how the performance on the rift is actually progressing or playing out.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that is something that coaches are doing, but then necessarily owners could do that, but it's just much more difficult for them. If the owner doesn't have a lot to do, then similar to like Reggie, he can step in and be in a coach, like somewhat of a coach. So although the coach is dedicating full 24/7 to a team, or at least a lot more hours than the owner is, the owners still are able to do some of it. And that's where it comes down to you're having to find out like individual things that a coach can do that owners technically can't. And that's when it comes down to time that the owner is having to do other things. And then sometimes owners just don't have the game knowledge, or like owners are like owners of different games and then they come to a different game and get a team for that. And then obviously they can't go and help coach in really any aspect unless it's communication, like, and how to speak with people and like mood.
Yeah, that's definitely reasonable. I actually hadn't considered that, by the way, so that was an interesting perspective. If an owner does actually start an org in another game and then decides to make a team and say, like League of Legends, knowing that it is a bigger game, then it would be pretty difficult for them to become the figurehead or coach for their own League of Legends team. So, definitely good perspective. Salvatore?
Yeah, so I think coaches are... They're really important to an org. Kind of like what Zadro said, like when a player is, trying out for a team and they hear, oh, like, okay, Zadro is the coach for this team. Well, that, I trust in his abilities. I've heard good things from friends, like it kind of like boosts that, like, want that players have to join an org. Okay. But I also think that it's very necessary to have a coach, because especially, so the way that I view an org, right, is you have the org owner, you have the org staff, people who like look after the Discord, the social media and everything, and then everything breaks off into games, right? So you have League of Legends, you have Overwatch, you have like whatever other games there could be, like Dota 2, okay? You have a million other games. Mm-hmm. And for like League of Legends, the way that would go is it'd be your head coach, your other staff for the team, so any analyst you have, assistant coach, anything like that, go there next. Then it would be the players, then the players that you scrim or the other teams that you scrim, and then even under that would be people in the org that like want to talk to the players and just be be around them, and then under that would be spectators. And the reason I put it in that order, as a head coach, like we talked about earlier, like your job is to do everything. And when you're an org owner, and most orgs have more than one game, the org owner, if they step in as a coach and try to give advice while they have a coach on the team, it's going to be a conflict of ideas, and either the players aren't going to know who to trust, or they suddenly lose respect for either the coach or the owner, because they're going to say one of you is wrong, and then they're going to make a decision on who it is.
I see.
So what that's doing, like, I am someone who is very against ever having an owner step in unless the owner has, in previous times, already shown the fact that, they used to be a head coach, or they used to be a player. And that's why it's okay for Reggie to step in when he does with TSM, because he's already been in all of their shoes. Him being with different games doesn't matter, because he was a player for League of Legends. But when it comes down to that, and you have, an org owner from one of the newer orgs or one of the older orgs that just has an org owner who's stepping in for a few minutes for, a B team, or even on like a main roster. And he comes in, he gives his 2 cents, right?
Okay. Then
the players are in this mindset where they say, okay, either we listen to him and he's got the right idea, and our coach is missing something here. Like, why didn't he tell us this? Or they say, okay, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. We don't know why he's here. Like, why are we involved with an org who has an owner that doesn't know what they're talking about? And it's something that people don't like to talk about a lot because it's, you know, it's a lot of like hating on one person in that retrospect, where like you're either hating on the coach or you're hating on the owner, but it's something that happens. And that's why I'm someone who I very much disagree with owners stepping in, because an owner isn't meant to be a head coach. Like, you don't own an org to be a head coach of it. You know what I mean? Like, an org owner should not be allowed to talk to a team as if he's their head coach, because he brought on a coach to do that for him. And like, if you're thinking about what a coach can do that players and owners can't do, it's a coach can be that person in the medium. Like, there's going to be players talking about, you know, what happened in the game. They're going to be talking about, okay, well, you didn't say this and you didn't give me a cooldown timer. It's the coach's job to say, okay, well, instead of us fighting about it, we start remembering to write down cooldowns. You know, we start communicating better. You have that coach as the person who's going to be the medium for every conversation. You have the coach who's going to, you know, have the final say on what's done. But if there's a player who says, no, like, we're 100% picking a Mumu this patch, his passive got buffed. Like, having a player say that compared to, you know, a coach saying, guys, look, like, I've looked at other regions, I've looked at the patch notes, like, no one is playing a Mumu, there's no reason for us to practice it, it's not going to be a good pocket pick, then the coach has the final say. But if an owner comes in and says, man, you guys should really start playing Quint top, like, I played that shit in, like, Plat 5 solo queue, and it was so good, then, you know, that's not the mentality you can be giving players of, okay, let's listen to the owner, he said we can do it. Like, that's not something that you can do. Like, overall, like, you have to have the chain of command established in your org properly so that players understand exactly who they're supposed to listen to when it comes to in-game things and who they're supposed to listen to when it comes to org-related things. And I feel like that's one thing that a lot of orgs don't understand quite yet, because they've never been on the other side of it. They just always think, okay, my team lost in a scrim set, I need to change something or tell them something. But a lot of the time, it's not that. Like, a lot of the time, it's just everyone is still getting used to each other. You know, you're still working on everything. But, like, you should always have the coach be the one to relay the information. Because the more that you give to the coach to relay to the players, the closer that bond gets between coach and players. And that bond is a very, very important thing.
Definitely agree with that. And I can see the point that you're making. A proper chain of command obviously does alleviate any sort of subversion between the two. How you highlighted how there might be mistrust in either the coach or the owner if there are two conflicting ideas. So just having the players have their say amongst themselves, and then the coach is able to kind of condense all the different ideas and give a wider perspective. And if the owner and the coach speak, then it's a clearer communication. And then likewise going down the ladder, if the owner has something that he might have observed or a goal that he wants to set, then he can tell the coach can create a plan and inform the players and then just execute the plan, while obviously avoiding that subversion that we were talking about in terms of trust. Definitely good perspective there. Covered a lot of information regarding coaching in different organizations, philosophies of coaching, responsibilities of coaches. So I just want to ask generally, is there a long con to coaching in the amateur scene? Is there any perceivable pathway to coaching in pro play from here? Or do you feel that the skills acquired are better applied elsewhere in life? So Salvatore, we'll start this one off with you.
I think so. It's a kind of thing where you start small and you don't make a big jump anywhere. You start small, you slowly grow. Like I said, I started off coaching a mid-plat to low diamond team. Then I went to a university team that were low diamond, mid diamond. And then I went, like you're slowly making your way up. And then once you hit, the peak of the amateur scene where you're coaching D1s, masters, challenger teams, when you get there, then you start thinking to yourself, okay, like, am I able to, maybe coach an ACS team? Like, do I think that I have that kind of ability? But, even before you do an ACS team, you go through OQs and you go, okay, there are all of these orgs and all of these coaches. And if we didn't win, then someone did something better than us. They prepared harder. They out macroed us. So I didn't think about the macro game enough with my team. And you learn so much from those little things that the process of becoming a pro coach outside of the amateur scene is gonna take you such a long time. I've been coaching for probably just over a year and a half or so now, and I am one of the very few lucky coaches who have been able to have the opportunity to work outside of the amateur scene. And like I said at the beginning, unfortunately, I can't say where or with who or anything like that right now, but even the stuff that I'm taking outside of the amateur scene in the next upcoming weeks is still a small step. Like I'm not going straight to the LCS. You know what I mean? Like I'm taking a small step and I'm taking my time with it. League of Legends is going to be around for a very, very long time. It's not going away anytime soon, especially pro play. And jumping, like making that high of a jump, like if I were to go to LCS right now, I would not be prepared for it. I wouldn't have that in-house experience. I wouldn't have all this experience that I would need. And you make a bad name for yourself when you start losing every game because you're not doing what you should know how to do. So when you start small, you do a summer boot camp with your org. Okay, you're starting to learn what an in-house coach should start doing. Like you're taking these little steps that are going to do so much good in the long run that, when you apply for that North American Challenger Series team and you say, listen, I've done in-house work for 4 months with this org. We got top 4 in open qualifiers last split. I've worked with all of these different challenger players. Then, that org suddenly goes, okay, well, maybe we can give you a shot in the challenger series. Like maybe you can actually do this. You've had a lot of experience. You've been in-house before, and like it's a lot of little baby steps that suddenly lead to a large leap in your career.
Okay, I think that's quite reasonable. It does seem, again, if we go up the ladder, even if we go into the direction of like the OQ tournament, as I was mentioning before, only 2 teams at the end of that get a crack at even being in the challenger scene. So I would imagine with such a small number of teams in the pro circuit, stumbling upon a coaching position would be really hard. So naturally, the baby steps, the larger the resume, the more experience, the better off someone would be.
If I can give anyone advice for it, is just take your time. Like, do not expect to be, a Challenger Series coach after 5 months of coaching. It's the most unreasonable thing you could ever think of.
No, that's definitely fair, and that's definitely good advice. And a lot of people need to remember that, because it's another human quality that we all share is, once we have an image about something or an idea of how it should go, impatience is almost inevitable. But the important aspects of honing the craft and diversifying experience, that equals a larger step in the long run. So I'm definitely going to side with you on that one. Zadro, what do you feel about the long con to coaching in the amateur scene?
I heavily agree with what Salvatore was saying. If you're looking to get in coaching, you start out small and you just keep working and working and working your way up until you have that really big resume, and then maybe you start trying to put your, dip your foot into certain puddles of semi-pro teams. And I feel like that is the best way right now, is to just go through the amateur scene, get your experience, and then just try to approach these other teams that have that are bigger established within the semi-pro scene. And then with the skills acquired, are they applied better elsewhere?
Yeah.
I feel like League of Legends coaching is like a niche. Like you have to really like League of Legends, and then you have to be good with people and love teaching people.
Okay.
I coach things out of game, and I teach people out of game on certain aspects. Like I do rock climbing, and I used to do rugby when I was living in Utah a while back. But you have to love these things, and although it could be argued if they're better applied elsewhere, or if this is the best place to apply them, it's all personality wise. If you want to do this, then it's up to you if it's the best place to do it, because you could be perfectly happy making a salary of a coach in League of Legends, even though you have the ability to say be a coach in NFL and make way more money. But it's all dependent on if it's making you happy, I think.
I think I might have framed it a little bit too vaguely, come to think about it. What I mean is like, and as you also mentioned it yourself before about how you develop person-to-person skills because you're working with so many diverse egos and personalities, right? So you learn how to handle different situations and different types of people. And I guess what I mean is using that as an example is since the margin of becoming a pro coach is statistically slim, do you think somebody can come in, coach for a certain amount of time, hone these skills of working with other people in a chain of command, and be able to apply that elsewhere in say, like a different career in something maybe more typical, maybe less niche, is what I meant by this question.
I think you definitely can, because you do learn how to talk and work with a ton of different people, and then you also understand how to be a leader and how to be a role model and how to think about things analytically and logically and make quick decisions. And you understand how to work hard because you're putting in a ton of hours and you have to have a drive to do that. And I feel like it definitely builds character traits and abilities that will assist you in many different aspects of life and not just career-wise.
Okay. I'm pretty sure this is something that Salvatore, you and I both agree with it as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So we've run through basically everything that I have here. So I definitely just want to say it's been a pleasure speaking to the both of you. Going back to what Zadro was just saying, how you learn talking, so it's very evident because the both of you are coaches, the both of you speak really well. So really just a pleasure. And in closing out, we'll just do a round of shout-outs, social media, and anything else that you guys want to present. So, Zadro, we'll kick it off with you.
All right, yeah, so I'm Zadro. Thanks for having me on your podcast thing. And my Twitter is @25_Zadro. I'm currently a free agent, you could say, as a coach. So you don't hit me up if you have something. But other than that, thanks so much, Leo.
It's not a problem. Salvatore?
Yeah, so I am not a free agent right now, but you guys can look for that announcement in the upcoming 2 weeks or so. You can see that on my Twitter. It's @lol_Salvatore. That one is spelled normally, so you should be able to find it pretty easily. But yeah, just thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I really enjoyed myself. And yeah, just follow me on Twitter and look for updates because they're soon to come.
All right. Sounds good, gentlemen. Thank you once again for coming on. I've definitely enjoyed this time. And for everyone tuning in, we're actually over and out. So see you next time.